These two cartridges in front of me are some of the newest cartridges you can get that shoot modern high BC bullets, and they actually shoot very similar weight bullets with similar BCs. The cartridges, of course, the 7mm PRC and the 6.8 Western. And in this video, I'm going to show you how the 6.8 Western is better than the 7mm PRC. And yes, I'm actually being serious. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see and figure out that this 7mm PRC has a bigger case than a 6.8 Western. That it is a faster shooting cartridge than a 6.8 Western. So, what's with my crazy claim that the 6.8 Western is better than a 7mm PRC? Well, it's not always about velocity. My first point is efficiency. The 6.8 Western is actually a really efficient Magnum, and it is quite a bit more efficient than the 7mm PRC. Let me show you. So we are on the Hodgdon Reloading Data website, and we are picking 175 grain Sierra tipped Game King. Let's just start with Retumbo. A max charge of 62.2 grains gets you 2,855 feet per second. So let's see what Retumbo gets you with a 175 grain in 7mm PRC. Now, just to make sure you guys know, I'm using 7mm PRC. There it is, 175 grain. Not the exact same bullet, but 70 grains gives you about 140 feet per second advantage with burning 8 more grains of powder. That's a lot more powder to get 130 feet per second more. Now let's look at H4831. In the 7 PRC, you're burning 63.3 grains to get basically 25 feet per second. We're on to 6.8 Western with H4831 with a top charge of 54 grains at 2,736 feet per second. So it's almost 200 feet per second slower, but you have to burn 9 more grains of powder to get that 190 feet per second more in the 7mm PRC. Now for this next part, I want to show you the ballistics, but before I do that, I want to show you the bullet we are going to be using in a 6.8 Western, and we're going to use a similar bullet for the 7 PRC. So in this 6.8 Western is the 170 grain Berger EOL, and it has a very good BC of 0.662. This specific load is averaging a velocity of 2,970 feet per second, and we have been able to get this bullet to get well over 3,000 feet per second. Could get it up to 3,050, but it's at a really good velocity with really good SDs at 2,970 feet per second. Now the Hodgdon data is extremely watered down. Every single 6.8 Western owner I've talked to about this says they can get at least 100 feet per second more from what the Hodgdon data says, and the Hodgdon data says you're maxing with a 170 grain a little over 2,900 feet per second. There's a lot of potential with this 6.8. Okay, finally we're going to look at the ballistics. So a 170 grain EOL with a BC of 0.662 with a muzzle velocity of 3,050 feet per second, 3,512 foot-pounds of energy. It's pretty good. Now, this is advertised as a long-distance cartridge, so we'll definitely go past 400 yards, but 2,348 foot-pounds, 22 inches of drop. Let's take it out to 800, where you still have the bullet going 2,000 feet per second and 1,500 foot-pounds. And then, let's remember this, 133 inches of drop. And then that 3.91 is the windage in MOA. And a 10 mile per hour wind at 800 yards. So you would have to adjust 3.91 MOA. So, can this hold up to the 7 PRC? Let's see. Now we're going to use a pretty similar bullet. It's a burger bullet. It's a 175 grain with a BC of 0.656 and a muzzle velocity of 3,050 feet per second. So the PRC is quicker. It is shooting a bullet that's 5 grains heavier, out to 400 yards. Again, almost 100 more foot-pounds, but the drop is basically identical. Now let's see what this guy does out to 800 yards. Bullet's going a little slower, barely. I mean, they're within like 7 feet per second, or 8. The energy is about 20 more foot-pounds because it's a heavier bullet going the same velocity. And the drop. It drops just a tad bit more. Is it really noticeable? 1 inch? No. The windage, basically identical, a little worse, but is anyone really going to notice that? Probably not. I know most of you do not reload, so what does the cost of factory ammo look like for a 6.8 Western versus 7 PRC? Surprisingly, the 6.8 Western is just a little bit cheaper. So there is one more little bit of advantage in price. So the average cost for 6.8 Western ammo is going to run you around $55. Let's look at the 7 PRC cost. On average, when the other ammo becomes more available, it's going to be just a tad bit more. It's going to be an average around $60, so about a $5 difference. Let's go ahead and look at factory ammo. We're going to use a 165 grain ABLR with a muzzle velocity of 2970 at 800 yards, almost 1,300 foot-pounds of energy, and about 146 inches of drop, a little less. Now the 7 PRC has a clear advantage with factory ammo. A 175 grain ELDX at 3,000 feet per second. It's going to have, well, about a little more than 250 foot-pounds of energy. And, well, the drop's not too different. So it's not too much different, but there definitely is an advantage for the 7 PRC. Now, this is really good performance from the 7 PRC. There's just only one problem. You're not going to get 3,000 feet per second in a 24-inch barrel in your 7 PRCs. I've looked just about at every single velocity test on YouTube for a 7 PRC. Not a single one has hit 3,000 feet per second, unless you have like a 28-inch barrel. In fact, I have an inside source at a rifle company that makes rifles that chambers 7 PRC, that does a lot of testing with the Hornady factory ammo, 175 ELDX, and in a 24-inch rifle. The company has found that on average, a 24-inch gun is going to get around 2870. That's 130 feet per second slower than what Hornady says you should get, which is pretty drastic. One last point I don't think should be overlooked is recoil. The 6.8 Western is going to have less recoil. And let's face it, a cartridge with less recoil, generally speaking, you're going to shoot better. Now, I know what the 7mm PRC owners and fans are going to tell me. You're smoking something, saying the 6.8 Western is better than a 7 PRC. And I know there are some good counter arguments. I'll name a few. The 7 PRC has a lot more support. You're going to get better brass. You have more bullet options. Now, as for now, the 6.8 Western, heaviest bullet in a high BC bullet is around 175. While as a hand loader for 7 PRC, you could shoot up to a 190 grain, 195 grain. So I understand that the 7 PRC is definitely going to have better ballistics when you shoot the heavier bullets. With all that being said, I think these two are extremely close, and I think these two are extremely, really good cartridges. And as I've talked about with Hopeful Ballistics, let's save the 6.8 Western.